Hey guys, tonight we're diving into the First Crusade. But don't worry, you won't need to pack a sword or a shield, just your imagination and maybe a cozy blanket. You see, the First Crusade wasn't exactly the glamorous, righteous quest. Most people think it was. In fact, it was more like a meandering, underprepared hike across Europe and the Middle East, complete with sunburns, blisters, and questionable leadership decisions. You probably wouldn't have survived the first week. But hey, at least you'd get a cool story out of it, right? So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where and when you're listening from tonight. I always love to hear how far my sleepy ramblings reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself standing in the chilly dawn mist of 1095, right outside your tiny hut in the French countryside. A rooster crows somewhere. Maybe it's a rooster, or maybe it's just your stomach grumbling from yet another half-empty bowl of barley soup. Word has been traveling fast through the villages lately. The Pope has called for a crusade to free the Holy Land, and apparently everyone who's anyone is going. That means your neighbor with the one-eyed goat, the guy who sells dubious relics on market day, and even your cousin who can't read but insists he's good at smiting. You're packing for the big trip. What do you bring? A tunic dyed in indigo if you're fancy. A rickety pair of shoes that squeak every time you step. A small satchel of barley flour. And, if you're very lucky, some dried fish. Remember that sunscreen made from fish guts? Yeah, some bright. Spark claims that's going to keep you safe from the Anatolian sun, though the smell alone might drive away the Saracens before you even arrive. It's all a bit chaotic, honestly. Everyone's talking about glory, salvation, and how it'll all be over by Christmas, which feels suspiciously like every modern group project ever. You, on the other hand, are just hoping you can walk in a straight line without tripping, over your own feet. The local priest says he's got a map somewhere, but you're pretty sure it's just a rough sketch of a sheep's back. You try to sleep that night, but the excitement, or maybe it's just the bedbugs, keeps you tossing and turning. You dream of great battles, gleaming swords, and the holy city glistening like gold in the sun. Then you wake up and realize you're still in your own hay-stuffed mattress, with your best friend snoring like a drunken donkey. The next morning, the village square is buzzing like a beehive. People are gathering with makeshift banners, rusty helmets, and an assortment of farming tools repurposed as weapons. Someone's even brought a rickety wooden cart stacked with pickled turnips. No one's quite sure why. The local blacksmith is furiously sharpening blades while his wife tries to sell her special healing potions, which look suspiciously like boiled cabbage water. And so it begins. You join the growing throng of hopeful souls, most of whom have never been more than a day's walk from their birthplace. The local priest, whose knowledge of geography stops at the next parish, waves his arms and points vaguely east. Jerusalem, he shouts, and everyone cheers, though no one actually knows how far it is or which fork in the road to take. The air is thick with anticipation and maybe just a hint of fear. You glance at your companions, a skinny shepherd with a staff taller than he is, a merchant's son who insists he's an expert in Saracen customs because he once bought a scarf from a passing trader, and an old woman muttering about omens and a red moon. The historians still debate why people really answered the call so quickly. Was it faith, desperation, or just the promise of adventure? Maybe all of the above. Some chroniclers say the Pope's speech was so fiery it could have convinced a turnip to sprout legs and march to Jerusalem. Others claim the entire thing was more about power plays than piety. But tonight, none of that matters to you. You're part of the crowd, caught in the swirl of noise, excitement, and the smell of unwashed bodies. The sun climbs higher, glinting off dented helmets and rusty swords. You tighten the strap on your satchel, adjust your makeshift armor, an old pot lid strapped to your chest, and take your first steps on what promises to be the most exhausting hike of your life. You walk, and you walk, and you walk some more, until the village is just a memory and the horizon is a blur. The road stretches out before you, like an endless dusty ribbon. Some days it feels like you've traveled to the ends of the earth. Other days like you're still stuck in the same old rut. Every step is a reminder of just how unprepared you really are, and yet, somehow, it's too late to turn back. You think of the stories you'll tell when you get home, though in the back of your mind, you wonder if home will still be waiting when you return. And as the sun begins to set, painting the sky with saffron and russet hues, you realize this journey is less a march to glory and more like a very long, very questionable hiking trip. But hey, at least it's a story worth telling. And so you trudge onward, one foot in front of the other, each step echoing with the promise and the peril of the road ahead. The road stretches on, and you're starting to think it might never end. You left your village behind days ago, the comforting smell of hearth smoke and half-baked barley loaves replaced by the constant scent of sweaty bodies and dust that clings to your tongue like a stubborn memory. Each morning brings the same routine. Rise with the sun, sling your battered satchel over your shoulder, and hope that the next bend in the road doesn't hide another suspicious puddle. It's early summer now, and the air is thick with the buzzing of insects and the occasional whiff of rotting turnips from someone's half-fallen cart. You're sharing the road with every kind of traveler imaginable. Knights with plumes that look suspiciously like they came from the local henhouse, barefoot. Pilgrims muttering prayers. And that one guy who insists on playing his lute even though he only knows 3 chords. At least it's a distraction from the blisters. Somewhere near the Rhine, though, let's be honest, your geography is about as reliable as a soggy map. Rumors start to swirl. You hear about entire bands of crusaders who've already left ahead. Of you following Peter the Hermit and his ragtag army of peasants and farmers. They say his followers are marching so fast they might even reach Jerusalem before you finish your morning porridge. But then you overhear darker tales. Some say Peter's lot burned villages, looted wine cellars, and started more fights among themselves than with any real enemy. You try to imagine what Jerusalem looks like. Golden domes shimmering in the sun, olive trees casting long shadows, the Holy Sepulchre glowing like a beacon of hope. But your daydream is cut short by the reality of mud caked to your ankles and the constant creaking of wooden wheels. You spot a local merchant offering genuine Holy Land souvenirs from the back of his cart. Never mind that you haven't even crossed into Byzantine territory yet. At one makeshift camp, you meet a group of German pilgrims who proudly show off their new battle banners, hastily stitched bedsheets with roughly painted crosses. One of them hands you a cup of something that smells suspiciously like boiled cabbage. You sip it politely and wish you hadn't. It tastes like regret and last week's laundry. One night, as you're bedding down under a tattered blanket that smells like wet dog, a scrawny Frenchman with a wiry beard leans over and tells you about the People's Crusade. They set off weeks before us, he whispers, eyes darting like a mouse, and half of them are already dead. You try to sleep, but the image of ragged bodies littering the road haunts your dreams. Historians still debate what went wrong with that first wave. Was it bad leadership, a lack of discipline, or maybe they just underestimated how far Jerusalem really was? Some say they didn't even make it past Hungary before they started fighting among themselves, or with the locals who'd rather have seen them gone than offered a helping hand. Morning comes, and with it, the decision to keep walking. You tighten the frayed laces on your boots and pick up your battered staff. Every step takes you deeper into the unknown. You spot a small wooden bridge, its beams creaking under the weight of too many feet, and you wonder if this is how your story ends, a tragic tumble into a shallow creek. But it holds, and you cross. The days blur together now. Sunrise, walking, sunset, a quick meal of dry bread and sleep that never quite settles in. You learn to recognize the different rhythms of your companion's snores. You learn that some people can't help but complain about everything. The dust, the food, the smell of their neighbors' feet. And yet through all of it, you can't help but feel a strange sense of belonging. Maybe misery really does love company. One evening, camped beside a crumbling monastery wall, you find yourself staring at the stars. They're the same stars you saw back home, but here they feel like tiny fires burning just for you. You wonder if anyone else is looking at them from Jerusalem, and if so, what they might be thinking. Tomorrow you'll keep moving, east, always east, toward a city that feels more like a legend than a place you might actually find. Some say the roads ahead are crawling with bandits. Others claim the Byzantines will rob you blind. Either way, you're starting to realize that this journey isn't just about reaching the Holy Land, it's about surviving long enough to see what comes next. And as the night air cools and the embers of the fire crackle, you close your eyes and let sleep take you, one dream at a time, like pages in a tattered book. Sleep is a cruel trickster on the road. Never quite enough, always leaving you with that gritty-eyed feeling like you spent the night rolling around in a sack of flour. Dawn creeps in, gentle at first but quickly turning into a full-blown assault on your senses. The early sunlight glints off dew-covered grass, painting the world in a haze of gold, but all you can think about is how much your feet hurt. You shuffle to your feet, brushing last night's dust from your cloak, and join the slow-moving throng heading toward the next checkpoint, a makeshift market on the outskirts of a walled town. It's a jumble of tents, carts, and suspicious-looking sellers offering everything from miracle relics, which look suspiciously like chicken bones, to rusty helmets that probably saw action against the local bandits rather than any grand Saracen army. As you squeeze between two overloaded carts, the smell hits you, an ungodly mix of spoiled fish, sheep dung, and that one guy who refuses to bathe. You gag a little but press on. You've come this far, and besides, you can't exactly complain when the alternative is going hungry. A skinny merchant with a missing tooth offers you a genuine crusader's meal, a bowl of something that might once have been lentils. You decide to pass, your stomach already turning at the memory of last night's mystery stew. Beyond the market, you pass a row of tattered banners flapping in the breeze, each one promising glory, salvation, or, at the very least, some kind of excitement. But you've learned that most banners mean little more than a desperate plea for recruits. You overhear a knight promising to make every man a hero, but you catch the look in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that maybe this whole thing is a bit more complicated than a children's storybook. You find yourself at a wooden gate that leads into the town. A guard eyes you warily, his hand resting on the hilt of a sword that looks like it's seen better days. He waves you through, muttering something about the toll you'll owe if you overstay your welcome. Inside the walls, the key. Town is a maze of narrow alleys and overhanging rooftops. Chickens scuttle underfoot, and children peer from behind doorways, eyes wide with curiosity, and maybe a little fear. You spot a blacksmith hammering away at a dented helmet, each strike ringing out like a warning. You pause at a small square, where a preacher stands on a makeshift platform, his arms flailing as he warns of eternal damnation for those who refuse to join the crusade. His voice is like gravel in your ears, and you can't help but wonder if he actually believes half the things he's saying. Some of the townsfolk watch with rapt attention, others roll their eyes and slip away down side streets. Historians still debate how many people actually joined up out of true piety, and how many were just hoping for a free meal or a chance to get rich. Some claim the entire venture was a chaotic mess of opportunists, lost souls, and a few true believers. But from where you're standing, it feels like a little bit of everything. A commotion at the edge of the square draws your attention. A small band of mercenaries, their mismatched armor clanking like kitchen utensils, are arguing with the local reeve over protection fees. You watch as the reeve's face reddens, his hands trembling while the mercenaries laugh and count their coins. You decide it's best not to linger. Outside the walls, the road continues its slow, meandering crawl toward the east. You rejoin, the crowd of pilgrims and warriors, each of you walking the same path yet carrying different stories. Some hum songs to pass the time, others mutter prayers, and a few stare ahead with that 1,000-yard gaze that says they've already seen too much. A sudden downpour catches you off guard, big, fat raindrops that splatter against the dirt road and turn it into a slippery mess. You curse under your breath, the water soaking through your cloak in seconds. Someone jokes about needing a boat instead of boots, and you can't help but chuckle despite the cold. As the rain eases, a small group of travelers gathers around a tattered map, arguing over the best route to Antioch. One insists on the coastal road, another on the mountain passes. The map is so faded it might as well be a child's drawing, but they keep pointing and gesturing as if it holds the secrets of the universe. You lean against a tree, feeling the damp seeping into your bones, and wonder just how far this road will take you. The laughter of children playing in a nearby puddle reminds you for a moment that the world still holds small joys, even on a journey like this. Sleep tugs at your eyelids again. You close them just for a moment and dream of dry clothes, warm bread, and a place where the road finally ends. The dream fades as quickly as it came, leaving you with the cold, damp reality of the road beneath your boots and the ache in your lower back that feels like a permanent feature of your anatomy. You shuffle forward, trying not to slip in the churned-up mud that now seems to cling to everything, boots, cloaks, and even the stubborn curls of your hair. A distant bell tolls from somewhere in the valley, reminding you of time's relentless march. You'd think that time might take a holiday during a crusade, but no, every hour seems to drag on forever. Someone ahead of you hums a tune that you can't quite place, a lilting, melancholic melody that might have been borrowed from a tavern or a church. The crowd ahead grows restless, voices rising in complaint as you approach yet another checkpoint. This, one manned by a cluster of weary-looking soldiers with armor that's seen more rain than battle. They carry spears and eye each traveler with the suspicion of a cat watching a mouse hole. You hold your breath, hoping you look harmless enough to pass through unnoticed. A young man with a patchy beard stops you, his hand resting on the pommel of a sword that's too big for his belt. He asks if you've come to save Jerusalem or simply to avoid paying taxes back home. You manage a half smile and mutter something about duty and faith, though even you can't quite believe it anymore. He grunts and waves you on, clearly more interested in the next bribe than your answer. You trudge on, the air heavy with the smell of damp wool and human bodies pressed too close together. The road forks ahead, one path leading up into the hills, the other skirting the edge of a marsh that steams in the late afternoon sun. A small wooden sign, its letters nearly worn away, points east. You sigh and take the marsh route, hoping. The air will be cooler near the water. The path narrows, forcing you to walk single file, the reeds closing in on both sides. Midway through, the world seems to hush. The only sound is the squelch of boots in mud and the occasional call of a marsh bird overhead. You find yourself thinking of home, of the hearth fire you left behind and the smell of fresh bread cooling on the windowsill. It feels like a different lifetime, and you wonder if you'll ever see it again. Up ahead, a commotion breaks the stillness. A group of pilgrims is stuck, their cart axle deep in the mud. A woman with a saffron scarf flails her arms, shouting, "For help," while a man in a teal tunic tries in vain to pry the wheel free with a stick that looks like it would snap under a sparrow's weight. You pause to watch, feeling a mix of sympathy and relief that it's not your cart for once. Historians still argue about the impact of these slowdowns, whether they were inevitable or just the result of poor planning. Some say the marshes were known hazards marked on maps by earlier travelers. Others claim no one had any idea just how treacherous the terrain could be. Either way, it's clear no one planned for the sheer volume of humanity and baggage slogging through this quagmire. Eventually, a knight in a russet cloak takes charge, barking orders like a drill sergeant, and the group manages to heave the cart free, though not without a chorus of curses that would make a sailor blush. You move on, leaving them to their struggles, grateful for the small mercy that it wasn't you stuck there. The path winds back to higher ground, and with it comes a clearing where a handful of travelers have set up camp. Someone has managed to coax a small fire to life, the smoke curling up into the darkening sky. You sink down beside it, the heat a balm against the chill that's been creeping into your bones since sunrise. One of the travelers, a wiry man with a scar across his cheek, leans in and tells a story about a knight who got lost in these very marshes and ended up leading his men in circles for days. You laugh softly, though part of you wonders how close that tale is to your own reality. As the last rays of sunlight fade, the night comes alive with the sound of insects and the soft sigh of the wind through the reeds. You stare into the embers of the fire, the red glow casting shadows on the faces around you, tired, determined, and maybe just a little afraid. Sleep beckons again, gentle and insistent. You close your eyes, feeling the warmth seep into your limbs and drift into a restless doze where the road ahead stretches on and on without end. The darkness is deep now, the kind that wraps itself around you like a heavy woolen cloak. Every step feels uncertain, your boots sinking into the loose earth with a sigh. You've left the marsh behind, but the memory of that sucking, sticky mud clings to your mind like a bad song. Somewhere ahead you hear voices, hushed and anxious, like a group of children swapping ghost stories by candlelight. You pause, straining to catch the words, but the wind snatches them away. A shiver runs down your spine, and you wonder, not for the first time, why you ever joined this wandering band of would-be heroes. You press on, the road twisting like a serpent beneath the waxing moon. Shapes loom in the darkness, trees, rocks, or something worse, and you fight the urge to jump at every shadow. Every now and then the clouds part, and a silver sliver of moonlight reveals a world both familiar and utterly alien. The road gleaming, like a silver thread, the hills rising like silent witnesses to your journey. Ahead, a small wooden bridge spans a narrow stream. The water gurgles below, a soothing sound that makes you think of simpler times, days spent fishing or skipping stones when you were still young enough to believe in happy endings. You pause on the bridge, feeling the worn planks shift under your weight, and let your eyes drift to the water. Reflected there for just a moment is your own face, hollow-eyed and weary, a stranger to the person you used to be. The current tugs at your reflection, distorting it into a grimace that feels all too real. You look away, heart thudding. A group of soldiers waits on the far side, their torches casting jagged shadows on the ground. One of them steps forward, a tall figure in a battered breastplate, his surcoat the color of dried blood. His voice is deep and gruff, tinged with suspicion. Who goes there? You mumble your name, your purpose, though it feels like a lie now. He eyes you for a moment that stretches like taffy, then gestures for you to pass. You nod and move on, grateful that he didn't ask more questions. A chill wind rises, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and something else, something that tickles the back of your throat with unease. You can't quite name it, but it clings to the air like the memory of a dream half remembered. Historians still debate whether these night watches actually protected the travelers or merely gave them the illusion of safety. Some argue that they were necessary to guard against bandits and raiders, while others point out that bandits often joined the very guards meant to stop them. In the end, no one agrees, and the truth probably lies somewhere between. You keep walking, your mind drifting. You think of home, of the neighbor's goat that used to get stuck in the fence, of the old woman who sold honey cakes on market days, of the smell of damp hay in the barn. These memories come unbidden, like moths drawn to the flickering candle, of your mind. Then ahead the road widens into a makeshift camp. Fires burn low, casting a gentle glow over tents and huddled figures. The air is heavy with fatigue and resignation. You slip between the tents, looking for a place to rest. You find a spot near the edge of the camp, where the grass is flattened but still soft enough to cushion your aching limbs. You settle down, pulling your cloak tighter around your shoulders. A group nearby shares a meager meal, some kind of stew that smells suspiciously like boiled leather. You manage a smile when they offer you a crust of bread. One of the travelers, a woman with hair the color of old straw, tells a story about a knight who tried to cross the Alps with his entire household and ended up losing half his oxen to a snowstorm. You chuckle softly, even as a pang of worry gnaws at your gut. Above you the stars flicker, cold and unblinking. You can almost hear them whispering secrets you're too tired to decipher. Sleep calls again, wrapping you in its dark embrace. You close your eyes and for a moment the road is gone, the cold forgotten. You drift into a deeper darkness where even your dreams dare not follow. Morning comes slowly, creeping over the horizon like a reluctant servant, carrying with it a thin mist that clings to your skin and makes every surface glisten like a newly washed chalice. You stretch, bones popping in protest, and take in the encampment, a patchwork of tattered tents, muddy footprints, and half-finished prayers. It's a far cry from the gleaming castles and holy banners you'd imagined, but at least it's a place to rest your feet. The stew pot is already boiling, sending up thin trails of steam that smell of cabbage and despair. You accept a wooden bowl with a grateful nod, even though the contents look suspiciously like something that might crawl out on its own. You swallow it down, your stomach protesting, and remind yourself that at least you're not chewing on your own boots. Yet. Today's march is supposed to be easier, though easy on this crusade is as relative as a cousin you'd rather forget. The path winds between rolling hills, the ground soggy from the night's mist. Every step is a negotiation between balance and sanity. Around you, travelers shuffle along in weary silence, some muttering prayers, others just muttering. Young Squire stumbles past, his chainmail clinking like an off-key tambourine. He's too young to be here, face still round with the softness of youth. You wonder if he knows that the enemy he's chasing might be the same one he sees in the mirror every morning. A wry smile crosses your lips. If only he knew. Somewhere, behind you, a monk recites a litany that's half prayer, half self-reassurance. His voice is soft, but the words cut through the morning air like the slice of a dull dagger. Lord, grant us the strength to carry forth your will. You roll your eyes, though you'd never say it out loud, and wonder if the Lord is actually paying attention, or if he's off playing dice with the other gods. Historians still argue whether these forced marches were a sign of divine perseverance, or just a logistical nightmare. Some say the constant movement kept morale up and prevented desertion, while others claim it was simply a way to spread disease faster than a traveling circus. No consensus has been reached, of course, but you'd wager it was a bit of both. The landscape shifts as you crest a small rise. Before you, the horizon unfolds like a tapestry. Hills rolling into valleys, the occasional copse of trees punctuating the green like ink blots on parchment. It's almost beautiful, in a bleak, this was probably a battlefield last week kind of way. A breeze carries the scent of distant fires, charred wood, maybe a hint of roasted meat, though you can't be sure it's not just your imagination playing tricks. You remind yourself that imagination is a dangerous thing out here. It can make you see enemies in the shadows, or worse, hope in places where none exists. You find yourself thinking about that goat again, the one that used to get its head stuck in the fence every other day. You'd always laugh, even as you pried it loose. You wonder if that goat is still around, or if someone finally decided it made a better stew than a neighbor. A sudden commotion ahead snaps you from your reverie. A pair of knights argue over a map, one jabbing his finger at a spot that might as well be labeled "Here be monsters," the other shaking his head like a disappointed tutor. Their voices rise in frustration. Words like wrong path and bandits and no provisions, tumbling over each other in a messy heap. You can't help but smile. Even in this grand adventure, this supposed clash of civilizations, it all comes down to the same petty squabbles you'd find in any tavern or village green. You resist the urge to offer them a piece of your own map, which is mostly blank except for a scribbled note that says, "You are here, probably." As the argument fizzles, the group moves on, the line of travelers stretching like a frayed ribbon across the land. You find your place near the back, feet aching, cloak damp with morning dew. You've been walking so long you're not sure you'd recognize a bed even if you fell into one, but you keep going, one foot in front of the other, because that's what this journey is now. An endless series of steps, each one a promise that the next might be easier. Night comes again, as inevitable as a tax collector. Fires glow like embers in the dark, and you huddle close to one, the warmth seeping into your bones. A few travelers share stories, some true, some not, and some so absurd you can't help but laugh. You trade a tale of your own, about a knight who once tried to carry his entire household on his back, like some kind of deranged pack mule. They laugh politely, though the weariness never quite leaves their eyes. Above, the stars blink and shiver, cold and uncaring. You watch them for a while, thinking about the path ahead, about the promise of glory and the reality of muddy boots and meager rations. Sleep comes at last, not like a friend, but like a debt collector. You let it take you, the night air thick with unspoken fears and unfulfilled dreams. Morning unfolds with a chill that bites at your fingers and nose, reminding you that the sun doesn't always bring warmth on this journey. You groan and stretch, the stiff ground having stolen what little comfort you'd managed to find in sleep. The air is heavy with the smell of damp earth and bodies too long unwashed. A delightful aroma you're learning to tolerate, like a particularly pungent cheese. Today's path leads through a narrow valley, hemmed in by low hills that loom like suspicious neighbors. The mist hangs low, swirling around your ankles with a mind of its own. And every sound, footsteps, horse hooves, the clinking of chainmail, echoes in the still air like a ghost's sigh. As you shuffle along, you catch snippets of conversation, some in French, some in German, some in languages you can't even place. Every word a reminder that this is less a united army than a traveling circus of desperate souls. A man ahead of you grumbles about his missing boots, convinced someone stole them overnight. Another curses a mule that refused to get up this morning, leaving him to carry his belongings like some overburdened porter at a discount inn. Then there's the tale of the relic, because no crusade is complete without at least one holy object to squabble over. A group of knights claims they've acquired a nail from the true cross itself. You'd think it would be more impressive than a rusty sliver of iron, but they treat it like the crown jewels, parading it around in a velvet pouch, eyes shining, with that peculiar mix of greed and devotion. You remember reading somewhere, probably scrawled on a tavern wall, that during these crusades, relics were as common as lice. Some so-called holy bones turned out to be pig's knuckles, and others were bits of old boots dressed up in fancy cloth. Historians still debate which relics were real and which were elaborate hoaxes designed to part the faithful from their silver. No one agrees naturally, but you'd put money on most of them being more pig than profit. At midday you crest a rise and look down into a village. What's left of one anyway. Smoke curls lazily from collapsed roofs and half-burned. Carts dot the landscape like discarded toys. A few blackened walls still stand, defiant but empty. You walk through the ruins, the crunch of charred wood beneath your boots sounding like bones breaking. A child's doll lies in the dirt, one glassy eye staring up at you as though it's judging you for every step you've taken. You pick it up, turning it over in your hands, the delicate stitching a reminder that someone once cared enough to make this for a daughter, a sister, maybe even a brother. You set it down gently, as if disturbing it might wake some sleeping spirit. A traveler beside you mutters a prayer, something about forgiveness and mercy. You'd like to believe it's meant for the souls of the villagers, but more likely, it's for the traveler's own peace of mind. Guilt is a funny thing on the road. It clings like a burr, sharp and persistent, no matter how hard you try to shake it. You continue on, the path winding like an old man's memory, each bend revealing another reminder that this journey is no grand adventure, but rather a slow, relentless erosion of hope. You try to count your steps, but the numbers slip through your mind like water through a sieve. As the afternoon light fades, a knight rides past on a tired-looking horse, its ribs showing like the bars of a birdcage. The knight's face is hidden beneath a dented helmet, but you can feel the weight of his gaze even through the visor. He doesn't speak, just nods, as if to say, "We're all in this together, whether we like it or not." The night is cold and mean, the wind tearing at your cloak like a thief. Fires are scarce tonight. The travelers too weary to gather wood or too afraid of drawing unwanted attention. You huddle close to a patch of grass, cloak drawn tight, listening to the wind's soft moan. Somewhere a woman sings a lullaby in a language you don't understand, the melody both comforting and haunting. It reminds you of home, wherever that is now, and for a moment you let yourself believe that you might actually see it again someday. Sleep comes in fits and starts, your dreams littered with half-remembered prayers and promises you know you can't keep. You clutch your cloak tighter, as if it might shield you from the cold and the questions that refuse to let you rest. You wonder, not for the first time, if this journey is less a path to salvation than a test of how much a human heart can endure before it simply gives up. Morning comes like a thief, grey and unforgiving. You stir from sleep or something that passes for it, rubbing grit from your eyes and feeling the weight of another day pressing down. The air is damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and horses. You hear muttered curses and the rattling of armor as your fellow travelers pull themselves together. Some of them are hardened by now, faces drawn tight as tanned leather. Others still cling to scraps of hope like rags. Today's march is slow, the road little more than a muddy path winding between low hills that seem determined to hide the horizon. Every step feels like wading through soup, the mud sucking at your boots with greedy fingers. A knight ahead of you has lost a spur in the muck and curses it like a personal betrayal. You smile, remembering that his horse refused to carry him yesterday. He's been walking ever since, every step a reminder that no title can save you from blisters. You overhear talk of the Holy Lance, a relic rumored to have been discovered in Antioch, one that's supposed to grant victory in battle. Some claim it's a sign from God, while others suspect it's just another piece of scrap iron someone painted with a holy story. Historians still argue about that. Some believe the lance was real, others insist it was a con trick to keep the soldiers from deserting. You find yourself somewhere in the middle, too tired to care whether it's divine or diabolical, as long as it keeps people moving forward. Midday brings a cruel sun, a mocking glow that burns through your thin cloak and bites at your skin. You wish you'd packed more than that rancid fish skin oil someone sold you back in the port, a so-called sunblock that mostly smelled like death. You smear it on anyway, because superstition is sometimes all you have left. The path dips into a shallow ravine, and suddenly you're in shadow again. You spot a cluster of tattered tents, the remnants of some previous band of pilgrims or perhaps just travelers too broken to move on. A rusty pot sits cold over ashes, abandoned like an old dream. You poke at it with your boot, half expecting something to leap out. Nothing does. A man with a crooked nose and a tunic the color of old blood leans against a boulder, his eyes sunken like he's seen too many nights without sleep. He nods as you pass, but says nothing. It's the kind of silent greeting you've learned to appreciate. No empty prayers, no false promises, just the quiet recognition that survival is sometimes all you can offer. The day drags on, your feet heavy as stone. The land around you seems to flatten out into a single endless plain, dust dancing in the air like fireflies. You think about how long it's been since you saw real trees, or a stream with water clean enough to drink without gagging. The thought makes your throat dry. As dusk settles, a horn sounds, low and mournful, like the sigh of some ancient beast. It signals a halt for the night, though you doubt any of you will sleep well. Fires crackle in small circles, their smoke curling into the twilight like questions left unanswered. You find a spot near the edge of the camp, close enough to see others but far enough to pretend you're alone. You wrap your cloak around you and listen to the sound of horses shifting restlessly, the clinking of chains and the muffled weeping of someone too young for this journey. Above, the sky fades from bruised purple to deep black, stars blinking like watchful eyes. You think about home, about the warmth of a hearth, the smell of bread baking, the sound of laughter, and wonder if those memories are even real anymore. Maybe they're just stories you've told yourself so many times you've started to believe them. A dog barks somewhere in the dark, a single sharp note that echoes too long. You shiver, though the night is warmer than the last. A voice near you hums a hymn, the words slipping between languages you don't recognize, weaving a spell that might be hope or might be despair. You let it wash over you like water. You lean, back against your pack, eyelids heavy, and let the night wrap itself around you like a warm blanket. The last thing you hear before sleep takes you is the hush of voices, the low murmur of travelers too tired to talk, but too scared to sleep in silence. A breeze stirs the canvas of a nearby tent, and you imagine the smell of home again, a kitchen with a kettle on the fire, bread warm from the oven. The memory soothes you, softens the edges of this harsh world, and for a moment you let yourself believe that you're almost there. The darkness deepens, and the sounds of the camp fade like a distant dream. The stars seem to drift closer, brighter, as if they're waiting just for you. You sigh, your breath slow and measured, and let the last bits of this long, strange journey slip away, one heartbeat at a time. End of script. Sweet dreams.